All right.
All right. It appears we are now officially, my friends, on the record. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard with this issue of Success Charger. I am super excited today to have a colleague, a friend, a guy that, people say you can never make good connections on an airplane, but that's exactly where we met.
It is.
We were both traveling God knows where several years ago, randomly wound up sitting next to each other on an aircraft and decided to just stay in touch. So, Michael Sunnarborg, you're here with us today. What's going on, my friend?
I am Mr. Scott, Mr. Connection Master himself. I am doing really good. And yes, it was Scott and I did meet on an airplane. And, I have had some of the most profound conversations with people on airplanes because you're kind of stuck there for, at least an hour or two. And you can't help but kind of, hey, what's going on in your world, So it was really a fun conversation. And as I talked to Scott about how I was manifesting my dream of being a writer and speaker and coach, and he was talking about, hey, I do teaching and training and coaching, and I'm doing podcasting, and I mean, we're just sharing our visions. I'm like, yeah, we need to stay connected. And of course, as the connection master, you were like, well, of course, that's my business. So it was a great relationship from the get-go.
Oh, that's awesome. It is good to hear. Well, you have a couple of projects you've worked on over the years since we've known each other, but you've got one that's pretty hot right now. For anybody that's watching this right now as we record on Blab, you'll see Michael's name is up there under the moniker 21 Days to Balance. That was a previous project you did, right?
It is. It was. It is. It so shall be forever and ever. Amen. It was actually my biggest, what I would say, a conglomeration of a project. It was a 3-book series that I started actually back in 1998. So I'd been writing it for quite a while about finding better balance in life. And I had been living in Hawaii, which was a far stretch from Minnesota, where I'm from. And I'd been living there experiencing all this contrast and writing and journaling about it. So that 21 Days to Balance was focused on the first book called 21 Days to Better Balance, and helping people find better or actually return to better balance in their life by following 21 bite-sized nuggets. I put them into days, but just a way to parse it out in small bites.
So let me ask you, what is your definition of balance? And let me add some context to that. In the world that I'm in, I talk to people a lot in typically a corporate setting, and they're talking about, it's about work-life balance, and we're trying to, I've got family, I've got whatever. My take on it is that there is no such thing as balance. We're all in a blender, and we're trying to make a smoothie that tastes good, right?
So, isn't that the truth? Now you're making me hungry.
And I'm not kidding. 60 seconds before we came on the air here, I was eating the last piece of a frozen pizza right before I jumped on with you. That's the glamour of working from home. It was a $1 party pizza.
Hey, if it works for you, man. You're absolutely right, though. You've hit it right on the head, and it isn't a work-life balance or it's integration, and it's simply integration. And that was basically what I learned after doing my research and my writing and such. Is you don't even actually go after it. You don't go after balance, and you don't achieve it. You actually return to it. It's a natural state within you. I mean, look at kids. Why do you think they're so happy all the time? It's because they don't care about the rest of the world, because they haven't gotten all that fear. You can't do that and all that. They're living in their own little bubble, which makes them superpower creators. Well, we're all that little superpower creator too. We just forget. We get people telling us we can't do things. We get negative messages from the media. We get all this crap, and I just call it coats of fear that we wear, and we get bigger and bigger and bigger with all this fear. And I'm like, hey, strip it off. It's what happens when you go on vacation, right? You go to Hawaii, take off your clothes, and take off your fear. So I'm like, why can't you be in that mode of returning to better balance like when you're on vacation more often? So that's what I write about.
Go to Hawaii, take off your clothes. That sounds like a good vacation.
Hey, I've worn boxer shorts and flip-flops for 10 years. I'm like, okay, when's the change of season? So I actually moved back to Minnesota because it was 85 and sunny around Hawaii, right? Same reason I moved there. I moved back because, I grew up with change of season. I got something to look forward to. We wear different clothes. Right. We eat different foods. We even talk about different things. The weather, right? It changes here every 3 months. So I'm like, hey, that's a contrast. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And you're absolutely right. We're all on this quest, right? And that's what the listeners of this show are all about is that, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, I describe as being that square peg people are trying to put in a round hole, right? It's people that see the world a little bit differently. You and I, that's been part of our ongoing discussion is, Do you work full time? Do you do freelance work? Are you just flat out, push all your chips in the middle of the table and say I'm an entrepreneur? And then what does that look like, right? In terms of balance and how we find what's really satisfying for us. But your latest project kind of takes a look at people that maybe have that unique opportunity to explore some of those, I'll call them entrepreneurial tendencies that many of us have. Kind of get into that. You've got a new project now called the White Box Club. Tell us about that. This is a really cool idea.
Well, what's funny is you just did a great segue. Thank you very much about the idea of career choices. We're all trying to navigate our way. And then as an entrepreneur, just like you, I'm also kind of torn between the work world of working for other people and working for myself. And it's kind of a bridge building strategy, by the way. So if you have a passion that you really want to turn into a career or a job, start doing it. Don't wait, to quit your job or get laid off or don't have to go from one to the other. It's an and, make it part of your weekend and some, evening activities. Start writing if you want to write, or start talking to people. So I was doing that, and I actually have held full-time work, in and out of full-time work, while I've been writing and speaking for many years. And I had a great job. I am in technology by trade, so my master's is in IT. So I'm a very people person with a lot of structure. And I was heading up an education and learning department of a technology company, right in my domain. Technology. It was in healthcare. It was education and learning, and I loved it. And the company restructured, and this just happened last year, about 6 months ago. And I got to work one morning, and I got a message. There was an urgent meeting on my calendar, and I got there, and all of us sitting in the room were waiting for this urgent meeting. And I thought, oh, it's like the new product changes are coming right on. And the CEO came in, closed the door, and said, yep, we're taking a new direction, and everybody in this room is not included. You basically are being laid off effective immediately. After this meeting, you can grab a box from the reception desk, go back to your office, collect your things. You need to be gone within the hour. We're sorry to do this, but it was a necessary step. And that was it. About 30 seconds. And that was it. We all just kind of sat there. And I went, I think I'm supposed to be here to help these people because I'm not getting laid off. I mean, I just got a raise and I just started a new product launch, and I'm a well-being coach. They know that. So I'm supposed to coach people. No, I was included. And so I got my white box, I packed up my stuff, and within 45 minutes, I was sitting in my car going, wow, now what? Okay. So I went home that weekend. I called my mom. I just love my parents. I called my mom and said, Mom, I got laid off. And she said, come home. So luckily, my parents lived 4 hours away. I drove home for the weekend. I started a blog about it called the White Box Club. I got my white box, and then I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a book about this. And so I did. And now 5 months later, the book's coming out. So it's called Making Lemonade. I've always been one to make lemonade out of the life lemons, and so I have. And it's just taking an opportunity and saying, wow, what am I learning from this, and making it into something productive.
It's really amazing where we find our inspiration, right? Those of us that go out and explore some of those creative desires. Do I want to write a book? Do I want to try to help other people out? What am I trying to do? For you, it was the world's fastest club initiation program, right?
Yeah, it happened pretty fast.
45 minutes from I didn't know I needed to be in the club to I'm now, it's like the old, I'm not just the president, I'm also a client.
That's from the old Hair Club for Men. Hair Club for Men. Look at this beautiful hair. I got this because I was one of the first clients. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, what qualifies you to be the guy that's in charge of the White Box Club? It's like, this white box?
Yeah, right here. I got one. That's really funny because the first thing I did when I said I was going to write the book is I didn't tell anybody because, in fact, my mom is one of my best advocates. She says, you know what? Why don't you just go through the process and then write as you go through it? Don't write a book about what to do until you've done it. And I'm like, oh, that's some good advice because I was already thinking of the solution. I write about better balance and I've got these books about solutions, but I'd never been laid off before. So she's like, why don't you just be laid off? And why don't you go through all of the steps and then make that your blogs, which you write about anyway, what's happening in the moment. And then those become the chapters of your books. I'm like, of course, my mom is the wisest person on earth. And she knows me well. She knows exactly what I need to do. And she was absolutely right. But then I also thought, I want to connect with other people. So in the spirit of connection, I thought, I can go through this alone. And it's in my chapter on grieving. You can grieve alone, and you will in many parts of it. But in other parts, you have to reach out and you have to let people, you know what, I need your help, or I need your support, or I would just love to have your ear today over coffee because I'm feeling pretty crappy. And you know what? That's when your real friends step up. So I formed the White Box Club meetups. Every 2 weeks, every second Wednesday and fourth Wednesday of every month, I formed a meetup group, and meetup is free. You can go online to meet up and form a meetup.
To the website for those that don't know.
I did. I thought I'm just going to form a meetup called the White Box Club and put other people like me into a room. I had lots of friends who have been laid off recently. It's just kind of a sign of the times. And so I started the club so we could network and talk, and I could learn stories from people. And then it actually helped me write the book. So it was a collaborative effort, and I have made so many cool connections because of it. It's been a blessing in disguise. It's been really a great opportunity. And you don't think about that when life hands you, a lemon. But boy, I'll tell you, change is always an opportunity for something new. And this has been amazing.
It is so remarkable. If you ask anybody what it takes to be successful, I talk a lot about, connection, because I think in order for people to be successful in personal relationships, business relationships, build a profitable, lasting relationship with a client, customer, whatever that relationship looks like, you've got to be able to connect. I mean, that is the common thread. But I think you tapped into another element that's probably a close second, if not on equal par. And that's the idea of resilience, right? So would you describe that the White Box Club, when you guys get together, is almost I don't want to say a coaching session, but it allows you to sort of take that energy that may be negative, all that negative self-talk, all that, many people, when they have a new project, suffer from what we call imposter syndrome, right? They're like, who am I to say that I'm an expert or that I have knowledge here? Because we so much seek validation from other people.
Yes.
And as you went through the progress, how did that change for you? Because you said you'd never been laid off, but you'd always talked about balance, and then somebody knocked you completely out of balance. Tell us a bit about that walk back, and maybe you're not all the way back yet. I don't know. Tell me kind of where that is so far.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the first things someone asked me when I got laid off was, "Oh yeah, so now what are you going to do?" Because they knew that I was coaching people through job transition, and I said, "Well, I actually know what to do from a tactical perspective. I even have some tools, a personal priority grid. Get clear on what you want. I have these tools I'd already created just for my own friends and some of my coaching clients, and I thought, I've got the tools, but then I thought I need to experience the whole process and really experience it, not from my heart, my head, but also from my heart and from my experience. I mean, like, really embrace it. So what happened was the whole White Box Club meetups, that is what really shifted me. And you're absolutely right. They are like coaching sessions. In fact, I even come into them as a transition coach, because that's what I've been doing, a health and wellness coach by certification. And then I formed it to transition coaching because that's where I found my niche. A lot of my friends were being laid off. People I knew needed help with their careers or even their personal life relationships. I can coach on those too. That's the whole balance piece. But the career piece really came up when all these layoffs were happening around me for major corporations that I used to work for. And so I had the tools, but I had to go through it. So going through it were the meetups. Going through it was talking openly about these specific topics that are of concern. And so each meetup, it's a little bit different group of people. I had some people at the very beginning who've now graduated. I'd say they've gotten jobs and gone to work. I'm like, hey, man, you're not in my meetups anymore. And they're like, I'm working. And I'm like, okay, all right, you got an excuse. Because they got work.
You get thrust into an organization because you lost a job and you didn't want to be there. And you graduate out. Do you have any of those people, though, now that sort of come back around on the other side and they become resources for people that are in that transition?
Yes, I just had one came and spoke about his transition to the group just on Wednesday, just 2 days ago. He came back and he's like, I'm working now, but I'm going to take the morning off and come to White Box Club so I can tell people about what I went through and how I went and took advantage of the benefits that were available to me. So I have a whole chapter in my book on benefits that are available to you, free training. I mean, you can go back to school. There's federal and state dollars allocated, your tax money. You've been paying for this, by the way, in all of your taxes. And then then unemployment benefits. There's a ton of benefits available to you if you've been laid off or in transition. So I have people come back and tell their success stories to the group because it gives people hope. And it also lets them know that they're not alone. And that was the big thing for me. I didn't want to be the only one going through this. And I knew that I wasn't. But when you put groups of people together, the power is even greater than individual one-on-ones. And so the idea of accessing benefits that are available to you, financial resources, the idea of thinking about, how do I grieve through this? There's such a lot of components in the process of a layoff or transition that people are going through. And I just wanted to provide more color and some coaching tips from that perspective.
It's really interesting. I as you are describing what somebody goes through, right? What it feels like, I'm reminded of some experience I had in my own journey that I had spent 3 years really focused in a difficult time when I was in the financial services business, growing a business. And I got to the end of that 3-year period and I had done everything anybody asked me to do. And there's more to that story, but the long and short of it is this. One thing I failed to do was to build a good connected relationship with my manager. And part of that was I was frustrated. I didn't learn till much later that I'm wired, that I clearly need to know what the goal is. And it might be helpful if I'm under stress or in a period of transition, I need to understand clearly what's the path. Like, how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? In the absence of that, even though when things are good, when things are normal, right? That's air quotes for normal. When things are normal, then I have no problem adapting. I know where the sides of the bridge are, and I don't want to hit the sides of the bridge, but at least I know where the boundaries are, right? And I can keep moving forward. But when somebody takes the sides off the bridge, I slow down, and it freaks me out, right? So you not only are dealing with people that aren't really sure what the next step is, but they've never maybe taken that close look at themselves to say, what is it that I really want? What do I really need? And that just, it reminds me of how I felt when I went through that on my own. And I knew that I'd had a series of events before I wound up in a life coach's office, sitting on his couch after lots of therapy with an actual licensed therapist. But this guy, I ultimately sold my financial practice to him. But I'm sitting there looking into his eyes, and he looks at me and he says, what do you really want to do? He said, you've only got a handful of things for you that are not negotiable, and everything else is, how do you want to achieve that? And he gave me the chance. Actually, he told me about a book. It was Dan Pink's first book called Free Agent Nation.
Yeah.
And
I have that one.
Yeah, I was so broke. I went on Amazon and bought it used for $0.25. It was 25 cents for the book, $5 for shipping. And somebody sent it to me, and it was a brand new book. So I read it, and I realized that, so often we identify who we are and give so much of our own self-worth, right, to the job that we hold.
Yeah.
It's that external validation. And I decided I wanted to be on a different path. And when I was able to shift my perspective to choosing how I spend my time, identifying what's my own expertise, being comfortable in that, and saying, this is just who I am, to learn that no is an okay answer, and I don't want to work for you is an okay answer too. Yeah. And when I made that transition, I went on a journey of my own, that led me to where I am today. I have my own business. Part of that business is selling part of my available time as a contractor to another organization that's in the same field that I'm in, so that I can have revenue today to take care of my family. Since you and I have talked, by the way, I've gotten remarried and I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. So
wow, congratulations!
And I moved to a different city. I was in Tulsa before, and now I'm in Houston. And I'm not sure I was living when we first met, but anyway, I say all that because a lot of us, until you get on the other side, right? You just mentioned it on the journey. It's like, well, I could tell you what the steps are.
Yeah.
And from a tactical perspective, you'd be accurate, but you cannot ignore the emotional side of it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so great because you touched on a couple really important points. And in the book, I actually break it apart. So if you've read any of my books, I always split things into three parts: awareness, alignment, and activation, because those are the three steps that I use to find better balance in my relationships, in areas of my life, my career. And awareness is really trying to figure out in this perspective with your career search. It's like awareness. It's like, well, now what? What am I aware of? All the factors. Like I've been laid off, or I'm leaving my job, or I'm quitting my job. The grieving pieces of it. And then you said something very important about the stability of having a job and having something to go to when that's gone. And I call that losing your anchors. It's an anchor. You get up every day, you go to work. It's a sustainable source of income. When that's gone, that's a huge anchor. It's like an anchor on your ship has been completely removed or uplifted, and all of a sudden you're set adrift, and people are like, whoa, I don't even know where I am. And you're basically adrift on an open sea because your job is a huge anchor. And I always said that what you do is an extension of who you are. So your human being is first, your human doing is second, but what you're doing is an extension of who you are. So when you lose that identification of self through what you're doing, it affects your human being. You're like, who am I? I don't have a job or a form of giving back to the world. You feel lost. So you have to kind of go through that first to know what that feels like. And then you hit it right in the head. You said, then you got to figure out who you are and what you want to do. So this whole alignment, you got to get really smart about how you're stepping back and thinking about, okay, what do I want? What skills do I have? I got to get some clarity on who I am, what I bring to the table, and then what do I want? And that's that dreaming out loud. So my whole second part is about getting to know yourself. I mean, really get to know who you are now. You're very different than you were, last week, last month, last year. So what are your current skills? What are your current dreams? And how can that become the way you point your ship literally to a new destination? And then the last part is the activation. You got to make it happen. So then how do you activate your network? How do you refresh your resume? How do you get ready for interviewing? And now you've got the language, and I've got this great grid in my book. It's called the PPG, the Personal Priority Grid. And basically what you do is you write down what you don't want, what you do want, and what you're willing to accept, and you get very clear. And then you go back through and you use that when you interview, use it when you write your resume, and you just keep updating it to get the language to say, yeah, that's not going to work for me, or this would be awesome. And then people can tell right away if you're in alignment with them and they're in alignment with you. I call it interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you for a job. Because if it's not a job you want, it's not worth it. If it's not a job that activates you, it's not worth it. And life's too short to work with people that you don't like. I mean, if you can choose an environment, choose one that's conducive to where you'll feel supported and uplifted and not oppressed. It's amazing how many people take a job for the money. And I say, well, good luck with that. Let me know when you need wellness coaching because you're going to get sick. I mean, seriously, it's going to make you sick if your happiness is your healthiness. So you hit on some really, really good points. And even no matter where you are at any point, you can also reframe your thinking and say, well, it could be worse. Maybe I do want to have a new career, or I want to go in a new direction, and I'll start thinking about it. But in the meantime, I can appreciate what I have. I have a job. I have income. I have a family. Even after you get laid off, you're like, I lost my job. Yeah, but you still have a home. You still have a car. You still have you have your family. I mean, you got to go back to it could be worse. And that's the ultimate reframing exercise. It could always be worse.
I had a experience recently that, a few years ago, I was traveling and training and doing this and that and the other. I mentioned I got married, and then I was in Australia doing some work. I was over there for a couple of weeks. And my wife and I connected about 3 days before I was coming home. And she said, hey, that thing we talked about before you left? We don't have to talk about that anymore. And I was like, what did we talk about before we left? I only gone 2 weeks, but I might as well have been, on another planet. And then I went, she's going to have a kid. She's pregnant. Oh. Right. So she said, listen, I debated if I should you when you, because I didn't want to surprise you at the airport, have you totally flip out on me? Because she knew it was a 24-hour trip, to get you home by the time you flights and layovers and time changes and date changes. And she said, I didn't know what kind of shape you'd be in. So if you need to freak out, do it while you're halfway around the world. And then come home in 3 days. And I was like, that's a pretty good strategy. Listen, I married a smart woman, right? But shortly thereafter, she looked at me and she said, we've never been through this before. I have no idea what it's going to be like. And she looked into my eyes and said, is there any way you could get off the road? Because similar to what I do now, I'm on the road, 100, 150 nights a year. And she looked at me and said, what, can you stay here? And it just worked out that a client offered me a chance to take a full-time job. So using the free agent mentality that I had, I said, okay, I'm going to sell all my available time to that one client and be able to get off the road for a little while because it's the right thing for my family. Fast forward 2 years later, some of the things I was brought into the company to work on, the company, we'd taken that as far as they really were willing to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down and looked at the president of the company. He looked at me and I said, I've done everything you asked me to do. I think you guys are going a different direction. I don't see myself being as effective as I used to be here. I think I'm going to go back out and do some good in the world somewhere else. And we agreed to part ways. And I had no idea what my next move was going to be. Right?
The magic time. I love that.
Yeah, so you give yourself the white box. That's a cathartic experience as well, right?
It is. And you know what, though? That's giving yourself permission to make choices that are healthy and in alignment with who you are. And that's kind of what I wrote about in the first book series was you need to find alignment with the people and the places that resonate with you. And everything has a life cycle. And I'm not trying to paint a dismal picture, but every type of environment and relationship has cycles. And we can, fortunately, choose to reconnect with people over and over again, like in long-term relationships, but then a lot of short-term relationships, which includes your job, and it may include where you're living, your current environment, and you can tell with friends and family, you go in and out of cycles, and it's really important to honor that because everything is changing and expanding and everything has a life cycle. So in our personal and most intimate relationships, we go through cycles too. We just continue to keep choosing each other because we're committed to choosing to make a life together. And then some people at some point don't, and that's fine too. So it's all a matter of honoring the cycles of life that we are faced with, and including the environments. So one of my favorite introductions when I had White Box Club the first couple months last summer when we started it is that I had a guy introduce himself at the beginning. We do introductions, and he said, hi, my name is Tim, and it's not his real name. My name is Tim, and I have been in my job for 8 years and hated it for 6. And I said, welcome, you're in the right place. Because he wanted to transition out of his job but had no idea how to start the conversation with himself. And I kind of coach the inside of people. I don't give them as many external skills. There's lots of people that do that. When I do leadership coaching, I coach the inside. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What are you focusing on? What do you know? What's your intuition telling you? How can we activate what's going on inside of you to help you start speaking and saying and doing different things, to make different decisions based on who you really are, which is what's going on inside of you. Like those kids, remember? Kids have the external conversation is the same on the inside because they don't have filters yet. We just lose the ability to remember what's going on in the inside. So I try to bring that up and say, well, what do you want to do? And people say, I don't know. And I say, well, sit down and get out a piece of paper and a pen and write down what you don't want. Write down what you do want. Write down what you're willing to accept and do a grid. And that's going to get you started. At least you start somewhere, right? So you can reinvent yourself at any point. Yeah.
Sure. There's an adage that somebody shared with me when I went through another, career transition, because we've all been through them. One way or the other, some self-inflicted, others, were imposed upon us. Sorry, they can spit your water all over your office.
No, perfect. While I'm drinking water, thank you.
Yeah. But the phrase was that activity alleviates anxiety. Activity alleviates anxiety, and I've given a lot of credit to that because your club sort of does that, right? It's like you can sit at home and wallow in your own misery and say, "Woe is me, the world is terrible." And you know what? People like parties, but nobody likes a pity party. So my encouragement to people is, just embrace it and go, you know what?
Yeah.
I mean, when you can look people that you barely know in the eye and go, hey, I'm Scott and this sucks. And they go, yeah, it does suck. So how do we make it not suck? Right. And make it better. And there's something about that, right? Just doing something, go meet people. And let me ask you this question. It's connection related, but it's also related to, the context of what you're talking about today. What do you think about these people that wait until they're a member of the White Box Club to finally start reaching out to build their network on, say, LinkedIn?
Well, I figure it's their own path and everyone has their own timing. So I'll observe that as probably their wake-up call. And I think many of us have a different wake up call, quote unquote, wake up call at different points in our lives. And so for everyone, it's different. And so for some people, like LinkedIn is a great example. In fact, my Wendy Griak, who presented 2 weeks ago for White Box Club, talked about networking and working with LinkedIn. And she is a great career counselor who really is a fantastic LinkedIn whiz. She will tell you all the ins and outs because that for business networking is your number one asset. And she knows that. And so we talked about that because that's what you want to do. It has to be like your online resume, and it has to match your resume, by the way. If you send a resume somewhere and a recruiter's interested in you, they're going to go to your LinkedIn profile and they're going to go side by side. And if it doesn't match, they are not going to follow up with it. I can tell you that right now. So you better make that your match. It better be consistent, updated, and be the same as your resume, so that it's consistency. But this idea of this wake-up call comes to everyone in different forms. Now, I've had several near-death experiences, which I won't get into, but those are definitely wake-up calls. You know, car accidents, falling off a cliff, whatever it takes. Sometimes we have a near-death experience, and that will wake you up. Sometimes you have a death in the family. You know, if a mother or father or sister, that will wake you up. Sometimes you get a white box, and that'll wake you up. Everyone has different moments where they wake up, or hopefully wake up, where there's moments of truth where they have to redefine themselves and say, why am I here? What am I here to do? And what is going on? Now what? It's a now what moment. So in these White Box Club meetings and in my handbook, we try to say, okay, now what? It's like, well, who are you? What do you want? Get to know yourself. And then, activate that knowledge. And I pepper those little coaching tips in there to take what you said could be potentially negative. This sucks. Yeah, it does. But how can we make this into a positive experience? Mm-hmm. So at the end of every meeting, I say, okay, so here are I call it Coach's Challenge. Here's my challenge. What are you learning from this? Mm-hmm. How is this helping you? How is this becoming a defining moment in your life? And then I leave with an affirmation, something like, everything I do is a positive expression of who I am, and that I can focus on what I want, and that's okay, and not selfish. And just leave them with a little, bit of support, so that the thread of optimism is what trickles through those meetings. And people that come in that are really feeling down in the dumps, have just been laid off, they're going through the grief, I say, it's fine, be where you're at, just know this too shall pass. Just know there's support for you, just know you're not alone, and you know what, it's going to get better. Just hang in there, and sometimes that's all you need.
That's fantastic. So before we get any further, let me take just kind of a brief pause, because I don't want to miss the chance to do this. You probably have some people now that are thinking about it. You changed the context for me when you talked about wake up moments. Because when we think about the white box, it's really, is it a stretch to say, if someone were to read your book, if they were to visit one of your groups, that, yeah, the context is primarily people that have just lost a job, but metaphorically, that wake up experience, while it may be a different trigger, could they still benefit from the White Box Club and some of its concepts?
Oh, yes, indeed. In fact, it's basically, I wrote it for anybody who's been laid off or who is unemployed or in career transition. But I've already had, and the book is being released a week from today, November 6th. So it's coming out next Friday. But I've had some people that have done proofreading and, testimonials from people who were reading it. And some of the initial feedback I got was people saying, wow, okay, I can use these principles in any aspect of my life. I can use these tools to get clear about anything. And I said, well, yeah, I wanted to build things that you can repurpose, that are simple and sustainable materials. They're easy to use, and you can apply them to many things. The white box experience, the being laid off experience, was new to me. So that was the context in which I wrote this book. But the principles that I write about and the positioning that I have about hope and encouragement is a part of who I am. So that's sprinkled into everything I do. That's in my balance books. It's in this book. And sometimes that hope and encouragement is what I need from others. I just need someone to say, hey, it's going to be okay. And you know what? This isn't the end of the world, and you're going to be fine. In fact, you're going to be stronger because of this. And I can't guarantee that, but I can certainly set out a roadmap that might be different from what you expect. It's going to hand you an opportunity. This could be an obstacle. Let's make this into an opportunity. This could be a crisis, and it will be in some ways, but let's make this a catharsis. Let's make this defining moment. You look back and say, wow, that is probably one of the most powerful, sometimes best things that ever happened to me. They're like, oh, thank goodness I got laid off. I never would have, fill in the blank, started my own company. Never would have, fill in the blank, meet these people, or met my spouse, or started a new business, or traveled the world. Sometimes the things that take us by surprise are the things that change us the most, and that can be an incredibly powerful and positive impact.
Wow. So let me ask. No, I love it, and that's exactly where I wanted. I was hoping that this would go, because you are somebody that, as long as I've known you, have really always come across to me as being authentic and genuine. But I'm going to add the word vulnerable, because you're willing to recognize that this is still a journey. It is still being defined, and you are still moving forward wherever this takes. And you're looking at it from what's your personal journey, from your own spirituality, and what that means to you. And it means different things to different people, from a career perspective, from a variety of perspectives. And we're going to get into a couple of those in just a quick moment. But let me ask this. What if somebody's listening and they say, okay, you're in the Twin Cities area? Is that right?
Yeah. Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, okay. Minnesota.
So there you are in the US. If somebody wanted to start a white box club in their neighborhood, if they wanted to do something like that, can you tell us a little bit about where they can find out more information, maybe access some of the tools you've put together, create a framework? Do they need to get in touch with you? Is that something they can do on their own? Can you walk through that process a little bit?
Yeah, actually, that's just kind of what's forming right now. I've had the White Box Club up since June, so I've just passed passing the 6-month mark here of having the clubs available and the books coming out. I said again next Friday the 6th, it'll be live on Amazon. So the idea of this White Box Club concept is something that some people are starting to already generate interest. So I'm glad you asked. I have a website, and it's easily known as thewhiteboxclub.com. So if you go to thewhiteboxclub.com, there I have the meetup schedules for people who live in the Twin Cities metro area, and I have links to the handbook coming out next Friday. And I will also then, over the winter here, we're planning to set up some opportunities to have people access the White Box Club information, the meeting information, to be able to deploy White Box Club meetings at their site. So I've got a couple companies that are interested. Some schools, some colleges, and career outplacement have been interested in starting some clubs, and also some career coaches that I work with that would love to start their own clubs out in the West Coast, etc. So I'm looking at how we can package that curriculum and make it sustainable so that people can access that. I also have a vision. I'm talking to my team about putting together an interactive website that would be available through the whiteboxclub.com, where you could actually go online and experience the content of the meetings and be able to interact online with other people. So it'd be a virtual White Box Club, and that would be something I'd love to get up in the next year too. I have to get all my resources together, but I have some talented people working with me, and I absolutely trust their judgment and their work. So I'm very excited about that possibility.
So you can find the beginnings of that community on Facebook. Is it Facebook / The White Box Club?
It is. It's Facebook, The White Box Club, and then on Twitter at White Box Club. So those have also started. I've actually just started them just recently this last week. So we're just at that point now where I'm starting to put it out publicly. I really wanted to test the waters with the club this last 6 months, write the handbook, and really be able to do like a pilot and get feedback from people. And it's been such a unique and rewarding experience for all of us. And especially for me, it feels like it's been such a collaboration, and now I'm really excited to start bringing it out to more people. So it's a project in progress, but I think it's very timely, and a lot of people are responding to it, and that really helps me feel like that's helping my sense of purpose too, is to support this, to be a facilitator.
I think it's phenomenal. Those of us that get that facilitation in our blood, right? We do because it satisfies us, right? It satisfies a need that we have. To leave the world better than you found it. And Michael, I'll tell you, you are doing that, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Place because of the work that you're doing, and it's all there. I'm going to take just a moment here. We've got 1 or 2 people here in the room with us on Blab as we record this. And one of my friends, Coach Jenny, is on here as well. I don't know, Jenny, if you have any interest, you want to hop in the other seat there? You have any questions or something you might like to add to the conversation? Jenny's a coach that used to be New York based. Now she's in LA. So she's bi-coastal, and she speaks both languages, East Coast and West. And
bilingual too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So she's out there. Jenny, I don't know if you're still here. If you can't get on, you may be busy doing something else. I don't see her jumping in there. So is there anybody else that would like to hop in? There's a open seat there. If you're with us here on the Blab, you can certainly click that open seat, and I'll let you in if you've got a question or a comment or a thought. Give them a second. You wowed them, man. They're soaking it all in like sponges, right?
Do you know, it's kind of funny whenever I speak, and I'll be speaking down in Orlando at a learning conference this next week, and I'm doing a few sessions on White Box Club and on my balance books. And what's funny is I usually end up speaking to rooms of about 75 to 100 people, which is about my favorite size, because within that hour, hour and a half, I can connect with usually each individual person just on an energetic level. I can see them, I can experience them, but a lot of people don't ask questions or speak because, as I said, I coach the inside of people, so their gears are turning. I can just see them processing, but they don't really want to say anything. They're like, okay, wow, this is interesting. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. But some people it's very personal, and that's okay. That's just fine. It's a very personal message. But you also said something, and I really appreciate your kind comments, is that I realized, so part of when I got this white box was, who am I? What am I here to do? I lost my job as a director of technology, but I still have all those skills and I can still transfer them.
Sure.
But my whole point of like, what is my purpose has always been, well, I am an educator. So I know that that's my purpose, to educate, but I do get to wear several different hats. So I've, taught college for 8 years. I've been a consultant, and I'm an author. I'm a coach. I've been, doing technology training. So I have all these different hats I get to put on, but I know that in, my heart of hearts, I'm an educator. That's just who I am. And so are you. That's why we love training and facilitation, and it's part of who we are. So I tell people, I ask them, who are you? And what do you bring to the table? And it's a really big question, but it certainly helps them examine, what do I do that feels really good? What do I do that helps other people? What do people say to me like, wow, you're really good at that? How am I is that being reflected? And that's where I say a lot of your purpose comes from. And I write about that in my first book. What is purpose? And I said it's reflected in what you do and who you are, and then how it's reflected through other people. And they tell you, wow, you're really good at that. And you say, I am? They're like, yeah, you're really good at that. You should go into that. I mean, that's how some people find their career. Like, you're a great cook. You should be a chef. They're like, really? And then they end up going into cooking school. I mean, sometimes you just don't know who you are until someone shows you. It's amazing. Or tells you or reminds you. It's like, yeah, I don't think that's really your style. Really? My mom, she's like, really? You're going to do that? And I'm like, well, I'm going to try it. She's like, okay, good luck with that, right?
I've been doing this.
Experience is the best teacher,
My parents still don't know what I do. It's just that their tone has changed a little. Now that I tell them I'm having the most financially successful year ever doing this.
All right.
I'm really happy with what I'm doing. I tell my wife I have the best job in the world. And by part-time, I mean I'm only home part-time, right? So it's it's hard. It's a grind. It's a job, right? I mean, there are I live in Houston, Texas, a huge place, and I will tell you that last week I had a client that was on. Like, I live on the north side of town. The client was over on the west side of town. I stayed in a hotel for 3 nights because I was going to be on my feet all day, every day.
Yeah.
And instead of an hour and a half commute home and an hour and a half back in the morning, I decided that was time better spent to go back to my hotel room, put my feet up, close my eyes, and just decompress so that I could be present in the room. And I thank you for being present here today on the podcast as we've done the interview, because you really are doing some great things. I have another segment that I want to move to here, and it's something that we kind of think of as a lightning round. So this will be some more rapid fire questions. There's basically 3 that'll make you think, 1 that's pretty fun. I've been kind of doing this here. So we're thinking 60 seconds or less for the answer on these. All right. Real simple questions, right?
Okay.
Here we go.
Hit me.
I want you to define this word for us. What is success?
Success in my world is feeling a sense of connection and feeling a sense of a receive a receipt back for giving of something. So it can be monetary, it can be emotional, it can be physical, but success means that you've made a connection with someone or something that makes it feel like it's well balanced and it was meaningful. And if that comes back to me, I feel it was successful.
What is happiness?
Happiness comes from within. Like success, though, happiness is not something you achieve, it's something you return to because it's always within you. I really think our happiness is something we access that's always there. We just forget about it. Because when we're natural and we're relaxed and we're free and on vacation, that's my greatest example, we're happy because happiness is a natural state. So I don't think we go after it, we return to it.
Oh, that's awesome. What advice would you give a 30-year-old you?
Stay the path. Continue believing in your dreams. Don't give up on them. They will manifest in many different ways, many of which you cannot possibly imagine right now, but just believe that deep down inside, you know what your purpose is, and it's all good.
Last question. This one's kind of fun. We'll see. You are stranded somewhere. Let's say it's a remote island somewhere. It's just you. And through the magic of the technology afforded to us by some magical coconut that's powered by sand or something, you have the ability to play but one album for the rest of your days. What one musical album do you take with you to this secluded place?
Oh, and you had to ask someone who loves music. I mean, like every single possible musical score you can imagine. It would have to be something that would calm me and soothe me. So I'm going to say anything by the artist Altus. It's Altus, and he's been giving away his music for free for years and years and years, and it's very ambient, it's calming, and it's absolutely delicious.
Ooh,
so one of his albums, it is awesome. Yes.
I may have to edit this so it just ends on the word delicious.
It is delicious. It's delicious music.
That's fantastic. Michael, your book's coming. Thank you for that. Quick housekeeping note. We mentioned a lot of places you can access the White Box Club. I will include all of those links in the show notes. So if you're listening to the show, just pull up the show notes there. If you're on iTunes, I think you just click the logo there for the episode. It pops up. Stitcher, wherever you are. We'll also have that available for this particular episode. You can just come to our website, look for this episode, and we'll have the show notes embedded there as well. So anywhere you want to find the links, you don't have to worry about where they are. We will also include a link, Michael, to where people can buy your book if they're interested. Now, I know there are some tricks. You and I know some people, and one of the tricks to getting people really pushed up on those top seller lists is to get enough people to buy on the same day, and release day is a good rally point for a lot of folks to make that happen.
Release day, launch day is a biggie. Yeah, in this case, I didn't do pre-order Kindle this time around because the Kindle book is actually going to be released after the paperback. And the reason I did that is because the paperback book is a workbook, and it actually has room in there for you to write in your answers and exercises, so it's more interactive. And you can do that on Kindle. You can if you print the pages out, but I wanted people to write in it. So it's interactive. So the print book comes out first. The print book is released next Friday, week from today, November 6th, on Amazon.com. You can also go to the whiteboxclub.com for links. They'll be updated, as well as my website, michaelsunnarborg.com, on the books page. So I'll provide those links to you. But it will be available starting next Friday the 6th, and that is launch day. So if you're going to buy the book for you and or a loved one or someone, buy them next Friday because, as you know, our algorithms go, hey, and it just puts it up in the search engines faster, and it gives people more exposure, and then it reaches more people. And as authors, you know, we love to have that exposure because that's what we're here for. I'm here to reach as many people as I can with a message that people have been teaching me. So I'm here to pass it on.
Thank you so much for that. Michael, appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for being with us. Success Chargers, get out, get it done, find yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pause the recording. I'm recording again. Just say something creepy.
You will be assimilated to the Michael Sunderborg. So bad.